Cloud. Okay, so we're just talking about the corrective actions from what we described, the problem that we described. So there's like multiple phases of saturation, and there's a whole bunch of different pieces of technical debt that link together to get us in the situation. So there's lots of fixes that we need to do, and some of them are more urgent than others. And I think from my point of view, the first thing that we should do is address Skarbek's suggestion of basically moving the authorized projects workers to their own queue, or sorry, their own sidekick shard, and that will be an immediate, like, temporary relief while we talk about the other options. Sort of the long term, like really big project is getting rid of carrier wave. I think that's kind of like we can't, Alessia has been saying this for 2 years, and we have to do it because this is bad. And then in between that, I would say from my point of view, the reactive caching issue that's basically masked all of the alerts because we've been ignoring the alerts for a month, that we should fix as well. Because we've been ignoring all the thread contention sidekick issues because of this known reactive caching issue. And Stan said there's actually because I've seen on the issue for that people have said, oh, this is going to be really hard, but Stan suggested quite a simple solution. So I think that would be good.
Yeah, to be clear, I think what it's doing right now, it's just ingesting a giant XML file and doing something really inefficient. I think we do some streaming parsing. So I think there were some comments on that issue about that, but we may have to link the issue.
I will also this is something like every time, and this isn't actually a GCS issue, but it might have helped us if it was, and also would have pointed us in that general direction, is every time we have a GCS issue, we talk about creating a service in our service catalog, in our metrics catalog for GCS, and it'll basically have two SLIs. One is like Sidekick object storage, and the other one will be registry object storage, and perhaps pages as well. I don't know if we've got metrics on pages for its GCS operations. And then if any of those things go south, we can go and look there. And one thing is we'd see, if it really was GCS, we'd see all three of them dropping. And in this case, it would only be the Sidekick one. So we'd know there's something else that's the problem. And that should be quite easy to do.
Right. And I wanted on that front, I know our GCS support person noticed the transfer times taking longer. And that was, I didn't know how to get that data. I was looking at the console. Is that metric available somewhere? I'd love to have that at least reported, because that would help us distinguish between when GCS is getting slow and when we're getting slow.
Yeah, that's a good point. We can go take a look at the metrics explorer. I haven't ever seen anything like that, but I mean, it might. They must have it somewhere.
We can ask the question because they somehow got the data and told us this.
Yeah, that time to first byte is super useful as well.
The other issue, I think, is to investigate authorized projects and just figure out we can make that much more efficient. I think you talked about the database bloat issue, but I feel like there may be some quick wins in either just not updating everything, or at least if you've already updated, a user's authorizations, you don't need to schedule another job for that user, right? Because a lot of these things are redundant. Instead of, we have 7,000 members per project, you don't need to schedule that 100 times. You can just do it once. It's bad enough it's doing once, but 7,000 jobs is much better than 700,000 jobs.
I think that was already a project underway somewhere, but I think they ran into some issues or they got delayed with some other things. I'll try to find that specific item. I know that we talked about this. I think
they all got pulled onto linear queries, Maren.
Oh, so the other rapid action.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but
let me try to find that
thing, right? Linear queries is one thing, but like
no, they got pulled into that project, right?
Yeah, they were doing the I don't know if you want to call it like deltas, group deltas, rather than like group rewrites.
Are we capturing that list of like to-dos or issues? We could attach them to the rapid action epic, or
I'm quite in writing notes, and we'll try to find all the issues and link them to whatever epic we create.
okay, cool. Where are the notes? Sorry,
Oh, I'm just taking them in. I don't know if anybody else is taking those. I wanted to just get this out there right now, and then we can put it in the channel.
yeah, I understand. I understand that. Yeah, thanks.
We can do it in a Google Doc if you want. I mean,
That's why we have the recording. We can translate this easily into issues, right? So
Just use AI to do it. Yeah. So I guess what I heard Andrew and Stan was that number one, we want to break up the sidekick pools, like move some workers to a different pool. That sounds like it's probably pretty much an infrastructure task. Are there folks in development we should be involving in that piece? No. Okay. And then removing carrier wave, which I just looked at, that's that file upload library.
Yeah, so I think there's an intermediate step in seeing if we can at least get rid of the idle transactions with what we have.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
It'd be a bigger
We need
win.
to not-
Getting rid of carrier waves is a much longer term project.
Yes.
And we already did this for project exports. It's not, we already solved that problem, at least for now. There's some trade-offs there, but availability is a bigger trade-off. So I think that we may want to take the similar approach or do something like that.
And that's like rewriting, refactoring sidekick jobs to be more
no,
efficient.
it's just like carrier wave's default mode is to basically save the file in the transaction. You can change it. You can change that behavior. The trade-off is that you might save the entry in the database before the files persist in object storage. But so there's some danger in like something's there but not really there yet. But the infrastructure risk is higher, I think, being a problem. So we could change that mode, for example. We could change and say do that, and we'll live with the consequences and see what happens.
And that protects us against any cause for a delay in the fetch, whether it's GCS or thread contention. It's a more general mitigation, effectively trying to minimize the duration of the least DB connection from PG Bouncer.
That's great. That makes sense. Yeah.
I think another thing is that this also illustrates like how problematic that Ruby thread contention saturation metric can be. And so we should maybe make that like a higher priority. I think at the moment it just goes to Slack. It doesn't alert. But the problem is, well, it will alert a lot if we turn it on now. So we should fix it and then turn it on properly.
So Andrew, what do you think about so the thread contention is a major contributing factor to this incident. The resource that we saturated was in terms of the side effects spreading to all sidekick jobs rather than just the ones with the
So
was
you're going to say
the
smaller queues, smaller shards.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering, what do you think about having saturation for the PG Bouncer connection pools be a higher level of alert? Because I think that's essentially the resource.
On S1. That should definitely be. If it's not, it should be.
Was it? Okay, so this is.
I mean, if it's not, that's wrong. Definitely should be.
Okay,
alerting.
Maybe that just got lost in the flood of alerts then.
So we've got 4 different alerts that are all very similar. We've got replicas and the primaries, and then we've got Sidekick, and then the synchronous web, and I think the problem is that the asynchronous one, the Sidekick one, is saturated so much of the time, mostly because of Archive Trace Worker, that we might have it as a lower level alert. Because it saturates a lot because of another known issue that we want to fix. So yeah. But if it's not, again, it is a critical situation.
Yes.
I know we have like a CPU bound shard, and I don't know if we're changing the shards, but this seems like a case where we have network bound shards, which are basically heavily dependent on just doing network activity most of the time.
But they all share the same PG bouncer pool. There's only effectively there's just two connection pools that matter. One is for Sidekick and the other is for the web and API. So I guess what I'm saying is any of the Sidekick shards can individually or collectively saturate the shared DB connection pool that PG bouncer provides.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Something I don't want to do quite yet, but we should start considering is now that Sidekick is running Kubernetes and it's not, 3 days of JSON to make a new VM type. Like maybe we should start making the Sidekick shard smaller, and almost giving each feature category their own Sidekick shard. Or
when you say
like
Sidekick shard, are you talking about?
So we've got urgent CPU bound.
Yes.
So those basically the way that so at the moment we have different shards
I don't think that'll help.
Workloads.
I don't think that'll help in terms of the connection pool saturation unless we make separate connection pools for them.
But in terms of the Ruby thread saturation, so and the other option, a more immediate option, is we could create a Sinbin shard, which is effectively where we put the known bad workers, which is mostly reactive caching, because of that other issue, the enormous workloads reactive caching infradev issue.
What did you call this? Sinbin?
The Sinbin, yeah.
That's hilarious. I love that.
And we just filter that out. We basically ignore that from the alerts, and then if we see saturation alerts for anything, while that's getting fixed, because one of the things is we've just been ignoring those alerts because of a known bad queue. And if we put that in the Sinbin, then, we'll get the alerts for, hey, everything, the urgent other queue is totally saturated.
Okay, so that sounds great.
I really hate to interrupt this discussion, but it would be good to know whether we can take an action right now on the separating the shard out, isolating the shard, because if we have a call in half an hour to monitor the situation, it will be best if we can kind of split off and start doing that work so we can disarm that call if possible.
We should start on that immediately if we haven't already.
Cool.
This is a separate shard. So to be clear, this is a separate shard for the authorized projects workers, right?
Correct. Skarbek, how about you and I separate, separate location? We can do a call, an issue or whatever, and start working on that. Matt, would you be willing to do a sanity check? Because I think Skarbek will need some help because of the selectors that are hard to actually get right.
I'm happy to help.
I just want to. Go ahead.
I really want to emphasize that any shard can saturate that connection pool. We have to address that. That is the resource. That is the most important resource to address, in my opinion.
So yesterday we saw this problem where one of the shards went down to its minimum pod scale because it was struggling to do this work. The CPU, because we scale in CPU, the CPU usage of that shard was so low, we just scaled down to the minimum. If that is the same situation for this new shard, we'll kind of magically avoid creating havoc across all of Sidekick, and instead it'll be limited to just this one shard that's the Sinbin shard per se.
So
that sounds like it's relying on Sidekick.
The HVA's default pattern for Sidekick is CPU bound, because the best assumption we have right now with the available metrics is your memory is out of scope or your CPU is out of scope. Let's give you some help. Okay. We can address that, as John has pointed out, when it comes to the CPU and individualizing that shard. That doesn't directly solve the problem of the PG bouncer being overloaded by a given shard set or shards plural.
Yeah.
So we may need to have a small dedicated PG bouncer for the problematic ones. The good news is we need to put that into place, but configuring that throughout the application consumers is actually very easy.
Yeah. So my take on that is we don't have a good grasp at the moment of our PG bouncer pool sizes compared to, effectively we're taking 500 connections into our primary, and then we divide that up between the synchronous and the asynchronous. And the maths doesn't add up at the moment, frankly. I don't know if you've ever looked at this, but it's
Yep,
pretty,
agreed.
and that's with 2. And if you add 3, that's a good project, but I don't think it's a project we do now. Like that needs proper consideration and a better monitoring and planning around, because, you know, I suspect if you actually laid it all out now, we either kind of quite far over, or worse, I think we're probably quite far under, and we're actually sort of throttling ourselves. You know, if you look at the number of PG bounces and the, you know, whether we're overcommitting or undercommitting PG bounces to Postgres's, I think it's just been done on an ad hoc basis. Like, we've made a change to PG bouncer here, we've changed the pool sizes, then we've made a change to Postgres over there. And I don't think any of those numbers add up at the moment. And it's definitely something that we need to fix, but I think it's like here be dragons.
I agree with you, but I guess my point is the fact that web and API were not affected by this regression is entirely because we have separate connection pools from them. If that had not been the case, this Sidekick regression would have wiped the whole website offline for hours.
And that's why we have it as a.
That's exactly. That's why we introduced it. So so I think in the same way, even if we don't get the numbers exactly right, I think there's a large margin for error if we steal some of the connections that are currently budgeted to the Sidekick pool and give them to a separate Sidekick pool for the sin bin. I think that would be...
the PG bounces that would need to go into that pool are effectively not the ones that cause the problem. They are the ones that use carrier wave, which is slightly, because, you know, it's effectively carrier wave was the thing that saturated PG bouncer, but the thing that caused the problem was the authorized projects, which wasn't actually consuming that many connections. So, you know, that's also something you'd have to take into consideration if you did that. So you'd have to do some sort of audit of the, or you know what you could do? We have the Sidekick attribute tags, and you could tag all of the carrier wave Sidekick jobs with a carrier wave tag, and then we could use a selector for that.
Okay, so that makes sense. So that would be
selector.
That would be a superset of all of the Sidekick job classes that are potentially going to make external HTTP calls to while
and
in
lock up
database
PG
transaction.
bouncer.
Right. And I think you or Stan said earlier that that it is possible to configure carrier wave to not hold the DB transaction open while it does that fetch. So some of those job classes may already be doing that. Am I being too hopeful here?
Yes, the only one that's doing is project
one.
export. Only the project export, because people were saving like gigabytes of files and we were timing out. Because there's a trade-off there, right? Because if you commit the entry to the database, but the file isn't there, what happens to your system, right? Like other weird things may happen. So
yeah, it's definitely a race condition between the two if we commit early. Could we I mean, there's a few ways to address that, but it may, there's a few ways to address that. None of them are trivial.
But if we can get the things that cause the front end contention on the threads into their own sort of shard, where they kind of won't do that to the carrier wave workers, you know, if we keep those away from the carrier wave workers,
you're
then we
talking
have
about
an
removing the
immediate
triggering
safeness.
condition.
Yeah. And it's not like there'll be something else that can trigger it in well, particularly GCS goes slow.
Yes.
You know, then we're always exposed by that. But at least this prevents the immediate trigger condition. Well, the immediate trigger condition is the customer calling the API. Yeah.
Right. So we need to block API calls for this bad behaved customer. Rate limiting could solve this. Oh, I'm sorry. That's okay. So all right. So I'm sold on this as mitigation for the trigger condition for the last 2 days of incidents. I do still think it's important to address the connection pooling, because that's a more general class of problem, and that is the resource that caused this to spread across a broader scope.
Yeah.
Okay, so can I summarize what exactly you mean by addressing the connection pooling issue? Are you talking about splitting out more connection pools, or what exactly do you mean?
Yes, yes, I think yes. Splitting what currently is a shared pool for used by all Sidekick job classes to instead be a separate pool. I like your I like your idea of having a separate one for carrier wave.
But if we fix carrier wave, Matt, like if we
Then we can
more
recombine the
generally,
pools.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. But I mean, I do think, and this is something that's always a low grade worry for me. I do think doing a proper audit of all of those, you know, the sum total of connections that we hold in PG Bouncer, and like it sounds like a kind of project that we do need to do as well. And then I'd feel.
I
Much
mean,
more
I can take an
comfortable about
hour and take a
splitting
look
it.
at that today.
Exactly. Like it probably wouldn't even take longer than that.
No, I agree. I think that's a very important question to ask, and I'd be happy to take that on today if that's useful.
I think
Which
it would be awesome,
I think
yeah.
it is. Yeah, I hate stepping on people's toes. This is definitely.
There are no toes here to step on, so don't worry about that. But I will say that carrier wave is used almost everywhere, so sometimes it's going to be hard for you to split out. You know, the CI ones are obvious because those are called a lot, but things like anything that touches LFS, anything that touches, you know, Terraform, Statefile, like all these things touch it. So I would argue that it's better to focus on fixing the carrier wave issue than try to split out the pool, because.
So,
oh, sure. Yeah, I'm assuming that that's more work than splitting the pool. And if that's a bad assumption, then we shouldn't bother splitting the pool. We should just focus on fixing carrier wave. I was going to add, though, that we don't necessarily have to quarantine all job classes that use carrier wave. We could potentially just focus on the ones that tend to be very high volume, because
the
really
CI
only
traces
matters.
happen all the time.
Yeah.
So you could argue that let's focus on the CI ones for now as kind of a mitigation, but you know, obviously most of our customers are not going to be thinking about this complexity of, you know, another Sidekick pool. So we probably want to try to avoid like painting solutions for ourselves that other people can't benefit from.
So one of the other things
I agree, and I think this is just a short-term mitigation.
Sure.
Yeah.
So one of the things that might actually help there is if you had, say, I'm just going to use hypothetical numbers now, but say you had 10 round numbers. We had 10 connections for the carrier wave, the scary carrier wave workers. Then what we could say is the HPA only goes up to like 15 concurrent Sidekick jobs for those workers. And then everything else will start queuing rather than timing out, waiting for a database connection. So you actually use the HPA to push the pressure back even further. But that's kind of an implementation detail, but it might make it slightly more resilient.
so two things is I think we should be tagging the jobs that are using the problematic code with the attribute as Andrew suggested. I agree though with Matt taking all of carrier wave and going you over there is definitely problematic. If we have two specific problematic background workers, the one that's using carrier wave, we can split that off specifically and limit it in the most generic way and most straightforward way, as Andrew has pointed out. Just give it a dedicated set, keep its HPA low to make sure it can't max things out on its own. Second, when it comes to the authorized projects worker, we may have to do some slightly different things to fix that problem, but it's really just because everything came together at the same time to explode in our faces, as far as I understand it.
With the way of technical debt.
I have no idea what technical debt is. Anyways, so whether or not we actually do the PG bouncer, now that I've heard further discussion and caught up on some more details, Andrew points out rightly that if we just limit the problematic set of workers to their maximum number, we can't saturate the PG bouncer actually, because they won't be able to open enough to saturate it, right? That actually somewhat mitigates the complexity of putting something in place to mitigate the problem we have because there's a code issue. That would at least, we have less to do in the infrastructure in terms of standing up the extra PG pool, unless we believe we absolutely need it. and it gives us a more direct way, which is actually a 10-minute fix through the Kate's workflow.
So the HPA upper bound idea, the size of the DB, that's certainly safe with respect to avoiding catastrophic saturation conditions. But the connection pool is under normal conditions not the constraining resource. So I think that would reduce our throughput for those jobs as well, right?
For the we'd have to get the
normal conditions.
Yeah,
So
we'd have to be very careful and figure out what the normal. You're on YouTube, Matt, but yeah, we'd have to make sure that we have enough headroom, and we don't, because especially with the volume of traffic that goes to archive trace worker, if we kind of constraining that queue will just grow very quickly.
Yes. Yes.
So you definitely want to have headroom in that. Yeah.
Agreed. And I was just saying that I'm just thinking out loud here, trying to play devil's advocate. Is that the right word? I'm trying to think about other edge cases that we did. Okay.
And there's a number of things here that I would love to have future improvements wise on a number of things in regards to what we can react to metrics wise, what can cause the changes in the HPA to actually cause that scaling. But yeah, I mean, we need to have room to stretch, but we do not need to put it so far above our heads that we're jumping up and down on each other's shoulders before we hit the ceiling, right? We need to be watching the metrics on what's causing the actual load and what are the known pain points so that we know if we're hitting that tipping point where we've got these backed up logs due to GCS being slow, thanks to carrier wave.
In this case, though, we had that alert and we've been ignoring it for a month. Because of a different piece of infra dev technical debt. So we do have the alert. And that's why I was talking about putting that reactive caching worker into a SYN bin, or just include, I mean, we could just change the alert so that it just ignores anything from reactive caching. Oh no, you can't because it's per shard, it's not per worker. But we could basically move that out of the equation because we were ignoring that alert because of a known issue with the SAST reports. I have to go because I have to say goodnight to my kids. So I'm going to jump off. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening, good day.
So I guess who can we get on this? The SAS thing was created 2 months ago, and it's in the backlog. And I got confused with SAS with JUnit, so this is actually a different problem. But I think Sam, you're on this call. Are you still on this call here, Sam? Did you jump off? Okay. I guess I'll ping him offline.
I think this is something in Wayne's territory, so it might be worth pinging Wayne first.
Okay.
I also need to drop off. It's 8 p.m. here. Skarbek, ping me if you need any support. I'll have my phone with me.
Maren, I had a question for you. The work on the Redis single queue project is he's gone. I'll ping him offline. John.
Why don't you go ahead with your question? Maybe Stan, who is very well in depth with everything that we do here, might know the answer to.
It was a prioritization question. I was planning on rolling.
So have that.
Okay. So this probe, actually the Stan, this was the probe that I was kind of showing right before we started recording. The one that scans through the list of all of the job entries in each queue. So we're ready to. So we've turned off that probe. I think a day or two ago, and we're ready to enable the new probe. So I was planning on rolling that today, and I wanted to see if anyone had any concerns about doing that.
I guess Andrew raised it earlier about what have we reviewed that it's safe to do now to do that? Like, what are we doing differently than?
Yeah, so we're only visiting at most the first 1,000 jobs in the queue rather than the entire size of the queue. So this keeps it down to, I think we benchmarked this at most 2 milliseconds per minute of CPU time. Yeah, so that seemed reasonable to me, but yeah, I just wanted to see if that was still a thing we were going to do today, especially since we have kind of the rapid action stuff to focus on as well. So I'll ping the EOC about that and see if they're comfortable with it. John, what can I do to help you?
It would be good to ensure that I'm operating against the right queues. So far, while all this meeting has been taking place, I've been trying to figure out where all these queues work on, like which shards they operate on. So Andrew provided me with a feature category that I could utilize.
Okay.
So I thought about creating a shard that explicitly uses that feature category in its query. Unfortunately, some of these queues operate in catch-all. Some of them appear to work in, where did I document it? In another shard. Like these are multiple shards that these queues are spread across. So it looks like urgent other catch-all, the 2 that I've found so far. I'm sure that might exist in other locations. So I just want comfort in my merge request that when I create the necessary selectors, it's excluding the right ones from the right shards, and I'm not going to leave a shard unattended inside of Sidekick. Because right now, I'm more concerned because scalability's been doing stuff with queue routing. So staging is slightly different than production for the catch-all shard configuration. So I'm working on a merge request to create one for staging and one for production. I just need assistance in making sure that I'm doing the selectors correctly.
Right. Okay. So
go ahead and mention Craig Miskell too, because he'll be online in the next hour or so. So he'll see that incoming when he gets on.
Yeah. The other problem is some of these queues I don't think we really care too much about. So I don't know if I should try to exclude those or not.
I was going to say, I thought that we were mainly looking to move just the authorized projects worker to an isolated shard.
Well, there's a couple of authorized projects worker. There's one simply called authorized projects, but there's also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 6 that are authorized project update : some other thing.
Oh, yes. Okay. Gotcha. That makes sense.
So I don't know if those should move as well or not. Like it makes it easier if it's just authorized projects because it just makes the entire merge request it makes the query slightly smaller.
Well, the one I don't think just one of them is sufficient because the one that was bottlenecked yesterday was the user refresh from replica worker. So, and I think that might be the one that's mostly used to, that gets called whenever you share a project or create a new project. I'm not sure about
one
the
specific
other ones.
API endpoints. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure about. There's a bunch of ones. This is fairly new, so I haven't looked at this in a while.
And Stan, the one that you mentioned, I've yet to figure out where that one runs at this moment in time.
Well, we can look at our Sidekick logs and tell you.
Yeah.
Hey, could I jump in with a quick question, unrelated to what y'all are talking about? Yeah,
Sure.
Just the root cause. What's actually causing the underlying issue? Is there a good summary of that, or I'd like to be able to communicate that out to others in the group?
Sure. Andrew summarized at the beginning of this call, but do we need to summarize that in the issue now?
Yeah, I might not have been on it at that point. So
sure.
I feel like I kind of have a sense of it, but I couldn't if someone wants to say, or either point me at it, or if just summarize real quick, I'd be willing to. I could type it out and then capture it someplace. So
Matt, do you want to take a shot at this?
Sure. Yeah. So so we've already got a comment to the effect in yesterday's incident to the effect of the connection pool becoming saturated, and
the connection pool to which connection pool?
So this is the database connection pool that all Sidekick jobs share. But the new piece of information that folks uncovered while I was asleep is that is this bit about the contention in among the thread contention on oh gosh, what is it? So having a flood of these authorized projects jobs was producing thread contention in Ruby among the Ruby threads on our on the Sidekick workers, and
because they run in threads, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And this was implicitly causing a delay in processing other jobs that were concurrently running on other threads from handling the storage IO. And as a side effect of that kind of recurring delay, they would hold their database transactions for a much longer period of time, which longer leases means the pool becomes saturated, and that's what kind of led to the propagation effect.
Okay, gotcha. So basically, flood of authorized project jobs, maybe triggered by a customer, creates thread contention in Ruby, which then starves I/O. Basically, I guess CPU cycles needed for that, and then the DB transactions slow down, pool becomes saturated, and bad time all around.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'll capture that in the issue, and I'll share it in the channel because I know folks are interested, and then.
Sure.
Yeah, the other thing they'd be interested in maybe is like what exactly we're doing. And I think, Stan, you've got a good list there, and we can kind of update that as we go. So I'll stop talking.
Yeah.
Thanks for bearing with me.
No, that's fine. And the working theory is by moving these authorized these authorized projects workers to a separate Sidekick shard, they will no longer compete with all of the other job classes that run on the existing Sidekick shards, and therefore are much less likely to induce the contention that was indirectly producing all of the side effects that we were observing during the last 2 days.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of action items, that's what we were describing as removing the triggering condition.
That's like the short-term fix for this.
Exactly.
Is like, good fences make good neighbors, I guess. And then,
yeah, exactly. And we know that we have more work to do because there are other ways to trigger the same pathology, but the way that has been triggering it on Monday and Tuesday, that's what we're addressing by moving the authorized workers to its own dedicated shard.
Gotcha. And do we know, like, is it like, a certain customer comes in and like kicks something off?
Yeah, we know who it is.
And is it the one I'm thinking of most likely? Okay.
Yeah, it is. It's the same marquee customer that's been challenging of late.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
Yep. And it's I mean, just to be clear, they're not doing anything wrong. It's just that the way that they're trying to use the product is not a way that we've made the product scale properly. So.
Understood. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and that's why we have that's some of the tech debt that we were talking about is to try to address that, so that what they're trying to do will be more efficient and less stressful on the system as a whole. Does that give you what you need? I know it was very hand-wavy. Some of the details are fuzzy for me as well.
Like for right now, yeah, that's perfect. That's really perfect. Yeah. So I just say, yeah, let's get focused back on the authorized project migration, and yeah, that's exactly it. Thanks.
Cool. Sounds good.
My meeting is set to start for us to all go join the incident room. I'm just watching the Postgres overview for idle transaction. It's not happening yet, so. Do we all just want to go jump over to that Zoom, and we can go muted, screens off to do whatever we want to do, but keep charging forward, Skarbek, with what you need to do. I just thought I'd check and see if we were okay dropping this one and joining the other one.
Do you want to put a link to the other one in the chat here just to make it easy to? So I don't.
The Zoom chat, sure. It's also it's also on the agenda of the or not the agenda, the top topics of the main Slack channel.
Of
But
the
I'll do
invite.
this too.
Okay.
So,
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, let's
and,
just
and I did update the invite after the Zoom needed to be abruptly changed. So
okay, awesome.
invite should have the right Zoom. Thanks, everybody. See you over there.